thevoicebeforethevoid.net. Money for the machinery of human slaughter. From Military Preparedness, A Danger to Democracy, by Charles Edward Jefferson, published in The Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science, July 1916. Edited by William Dudley and The Voice Before the Void. Read by The Voice Before the Void. As a people, we are not equipped to fulfill our obligations either to ourselves or to mankind. We are not politically prepared. We have a Department of the Navy, but no Department of International Conciliation. A Secretary of War, but no Secretary of Peace. We spend the enormous sum of $250 million every year on our Army and Navy, and scarcely a dollar for the maintenance of agencies for feeding the fountains of international goodwill. We have erected no safeguards by which a President of the United States can be prevented from plunging us into war. Technically, only Congress can declare war. But as our Constitution now stands, any president is at liberty in his dealing with foreign governments to take steps of such a character that Congress is virtually committed to war. There is such a thing as industrial preparedness, and we need it. The great world of the wage-earning masses must be elevated and harmonized, and a better spirit must be created in the hearts both of capital and labor. The idea that a nation's life depends wholly on the courage of its soldiers is an ancient superstition which the present war has exploded. The delusion that generals and admirals are the sole custodians of a nation's honor has been dissipated forever. We know now that mechanics are as necessary for success on the battlefield as the men who carry guns, and that without the loyal support of the common day laborer, no nation can hope for victory. When Mr. David Lloyd George, Prime Minister of Great Britain, begged the Welsh coal miners to go back to their work, assuring them that the destiny of the British Empire rested on their shoulders, the world caught a glimpse of a fact it will never forget. No nation can any longer be victorious in war unless it has the loyal cooperation of all classes of its people. Unity of spirit, even more than dreadnoughts and howitzers, is the final safeguard of a nation's life. The men who give their days and nights to elaborating fresh schemes for the multiplication of guns deal too much with the physical, forgetting that at last everything depends on a nation's soul. The world tragedy of the last 40 years has been the squandering of energy on devising material defenses, which in the crucial hour failed to save Europe from the unspeakable havoc which those defenses had been created to ward off. If 1/10 of the money spent on defense had been spent in cultivating kindlier feelings and loftier ideals, this war would never have been. The tragedy of the International Hague Conferences was that both in 1899 and in 1907, A large part of the time was devoted not to working out a scheme by which war might be abolished, but to the work of laying down technical rules by which the bloody game of human butchery could still be played. This is the tragedy of America at the present hour, when every sound mind and heart should be brooding over the question, how can we so order the world's life that a recurrence of this tragedy shall never be? There are instead thousands of Americans thinking of nothing else, talking of nothing else, suggesting nothing else but the old stupid experiment which has again and again soaked our planet with blood. How are we ever going to get out of the heartbreaking predicament in which humanity finds itself, unless men who think dare to break away from the military traditions which have cursed and destroyed so many generations? Cannot we get beyond the ideas of Tiglath-Pileser and Ramses II? Cannot we rise above the ideal of the caveman? He always armed for defense. He thought only of his own skin. He was an undeveloped creature and is to be excused because he lived in the morning of the world. But what shall we say of men who, living 2,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ, cannot advance an inch in their conception of international life beyond that which was regnant in the ancient barbaric world? Military preparedness is a peril to democracy and a menace to the peace of the world. Piling up explosives in a world where so many persons carry matches is perilous. Running races in naval tonnage is exciting, but perilous. Diplomacy, which relies on the pressure of guns, is sometimes effective, but always perilous. Making other nations afraid of us is perilous. Germany made her neighbors afraid of her, and so she was gradually surrounded by a tightening ring of steel. We shall circle ourselves with a similar ring by a like policy of military efficiency. It is perilous to drill the young men of a nation in the art of shooting human beings. It is perilous to pile additional burdens on the backs of taxpayers for the support of vast numbers of men in barracks and on battleships. It is perilous to squander on instruments of slaughter the money entrusted to us by the Almighty for the service of mankind. Our nation is a steward, and it must render a strict account for all its gold. It is perilous to waste the time of our National Congress in interminable discussions over the Army and Navy. For 25 years, Congress has shamefully neglected matters of sovereign importance to devote session after session to wrangling over the types and numbers and prices of ships and guns. It is perilous to play with the passion of fear. Fear is the mightiest and most demoralizing of all the passions. Fear paralyzes the nerves of reason. Men no longer think when they are afraid. Militarism flourishes only in an atmosphere of fear. Huge appropriations for ships and guns are possible only when nations are terrorized. The astute men who are at the bottom of this military preparedness movement know that now, when the whole world is panic-stricken because of long, continued bloodshed, it is the best possible time for making an effort to swing our republic still farther out into the maelstrom of militarism. Somebody says, "We arm solely for defense. We prepare not for war, but against war. Indeed, European nations prepared only against war, and behold, you cannot change a situation by altering a preposition. Things are what they are, no matter what names you give them. Preparing against war is identically the same thing as preparing for war. We are never going to use our army or our navy for aggression. Who said that? Who has authority to say that? No one. The Secretary of the Navy cannot say it. Poor man, he will be out of office long before the big machine he has planned is ready for use. No congressman can say it. He also is like a flower of the field. In the morning he grows up and flourishes, but in the evening he is cut down and withered. No president of the United States can say it. He is in his office for a brief season, and then the place that once knew him knows him no more. He may possibly be succeeded by a megalomaniac who has a fashion of thinking his own notions synonymous with eternal justice, and who, when he wants a thing, takes it. Let no one be fooled by all this talk about never using our army and navy except for defense. Create a war machine, and God only knows who will use it. Ah, but we are a peace-loving people. So we are, and so are all Europeans. There is not a war-loving people in Europe. They all love peace. They all hate war. They spent $40 billion in trying to ward off this war. They simply prepared for it, and so they got it. We live in a universe in which we get not what we want, but what we deserve. Whatsoever we sow, we reap. The universe pays no attention to what we want. We do not want war, but let us make ever-increasing preparation for war, and there is no escape. Therefore, let us prepare now for peace. It will take the self-sacrificing labors of tens of thousands of men, we know not how many years, to work out the machinery of peace. We have got to organize the world. It will cost energy and time and money. Let us spend money for peace. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions, tens of billions, whatever is necessary for peace. Now we stand at the gravest crisis in all human history, when every nation not engaged in the conflict ought to be asking itself not how it can save its own hide, but how it can minister to the crying and awful needs of a wounded, bleeding world. Tens of thousands of human beings like ourselves, men, women, and little children, are on the verge of starvation. And our government officials come forward with a scheme that calls for the expenditure in one department alone of $500 million within 5 short years for the extension of the machinery of human slaughter. Not $1 for bread, but every dollar for war. O judgment, thou hast fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Would that we had a secretary of peace, a man who, at an hour like this, would present a scheme for increasing the happiness and well-being of our people. Millions for new roads, millions for new buildings, millions for new schools, millions for new farms to be carved out of the deserts and the swamps, millions for fighting disease, millions for preventing accidents, millions for brightening the lives of the poor and the ignorant and the forlorn, millions for the solutions of problems which have long vexed us, and millions for forwarding noble enterprises to their coronation. $500 million to be spent in the next 5 years in making us a healthier, happier, and better people. This is the preparedness which fits us to fulfill our duties. But this would not defend us, someone says, from our foreign enemies. They would be attracted by our increased prosperity and might break in and steal our treasures. Well then, let us build up lines of defense in foreign lands. We have spent $178 million on coast defenses, and an expert has declared that any foreign army can easily walk around them. Why not build coast defenses which nobody can walk around? Why not build them in the hearts of nations? Oh, for a secretary who would suggest not $500 million for machinery to sink boys of foreign countries to the bottom of the sea, but who would recommend $500 million for healing the open sore of the world. The price of a dreadnought to each of the warring nations for the establishment, at the close of the war, of hospitals and orphanages and homes and schools for the service of the great company of those whom the war will have left impoverished and helpless. The price of a battle cruiser and torpedo boat and a submarine to each of those nations for the endowment of these various institutions. $500 million for the relief of the nations who are stripped of their raiment and wounded and half dead. Why should it be thought a thing incredible that a Christian nation should do a Christian deed? Would there then be danger of a foreign invasion? Some men are so hidebound in their materialism, they cannot conceive of any defenses except those made of concrete and steel. We Americans are often accused of worshiping the almighty dollar. We are counted money makers, money grabbers. Why not show the world that we can be money givers? Why not cease this shameful shivering and whimpering over the prospect of somebody hurting us, and show the world that we can think of helping others? Spend your $500 million on warships, and in less than 20 years they are all on the scrap heap. Spend $500 million on institutions scattered over the world for the care of those whom this awful war has maimed and mangled, and they will stand forever as the imperishable monuments of a great republic's love. Do you say this is impracticable? I tell you it is not. A noble deed is always practicable.